be allowed to testify about. Hoffinger, the prosecutor, says they're being careful to omit some details that are, quote, too salacious. Again, this is where we are as a country right now, that we are having this discussion and this debate in the courtroom. And Dana Bash, I guess it's good that the prosecutor says that they're going to omit some details that are too salacious. The prosecutor is also saying, quote, in terms of the sexual act, it will be very basic. I can't believe I have to read this on television. It's not going to involve any descriptions.
Better you than me, Jake.
It's not going to involve any descriptions of anything in particular. So
just read it. Read it on the screen.
The idea of the detail of this and how humiliating or detailed it's going to be or needs to be is very much being debated right now. And I'm assuming the jury is not there. They're talking about this before Stormy Daniels, who will not be the first witness today, we're told, at least according to the defense attorneys, the second witness. But it is this encounter between Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump, alleged encounter, I should say, because he still says it never happened. This alleged encounter happened in 2006. He was married to Melania Trump, who he's still married to. She had just had their son, Barron. And it is this encounter that has prompted all of this, not necessarily the encounter itself, but trying to hide this encounter, allegedly, from the American people in October 2016, right before the presidential election. Right now, Todd Blanche, the Trump attorney, is whispering to Trump as Hoffinger, the prosecutor, talks about Stormy Daniels on the witness stand. Dana, Hoffinger says, it's important for us to elicit how she came to have sex with him and how she felt about it. I'm not quite sure why it's important for them to elicit that. Nichols, the Trump's attorney, the Susan Nichols, reiterates that this is a case about books and records, which is true. She's correct about that. Dana.
Well, maybe it's all true.
Yeah.
Look, this is, by all accounts, understandably, the testimony that Donald Trump has been most concerned about, most worried about when it comes to everything, but probably most importantly, his family. And this is the kind of conversation, well, Mershon says it's fine to elicit that Trump and Daniels had sex. That's fine, but we don't need to know the details, the judge says.
Nope, we don't.
And I think I speak for the American people when I say
thank you,
Judge
Your
Mershon.
Honor,
I appreciate it. Yes. The judge is saying that he agrees with Trump's attorneys that Stormy
Daniels has taken a stand. Let me just check on the day here. Yeah, it is Tuesday, May the 7th. 2024. Stormy Daniels now appearing in court in New York for the hush money trial. Obviously, she's at the center of most of this. The first part of the testimony has had Stormy talking about her meeting with Trump, who comes across as very arrogant and not particularly somebody who most new fathers are not normally hanging around porn stars. That's just a fact. They're probably really excited, they have a newborn, they want to share pictures and that, but instead, he is, well, have a listen, this is her words, and she's credible. Why would she, under oath, just the details? But of course, amongst the MAGA world, they probably think this, how do the evangelical people, that is just the question, seriously, please, how do they stomach this? I mean, which pastor, which person, which big voice amongst the evangelical church endorses somebody who is a brand new parent spending time with a porn star? Oh, and by the way, the porn star was a side chick because he was also having an affair with somebody else totally different, a Playboy bunny. Now, you can say that's Trump. Family affair.
Jose, let's take a step back for a moment here. 6 months out from the 2024 presidential election, you have the presumptive Republican nominee inside of a courtroom listening to the testimony of an adult film star in which she is alleging that Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, engaged in an extramarital affair just 4 months after his son, Barron, was born. This is hitting at the heart of the credibility of not Stormy Daniels, but of the defendant, Donald Trump. The details that are being described in front of this jury are quite explicit. Having Stormy Daniels say that she took a rolled-up magazine and spanked Donald Trump in the butt, it's graphic, it is very specific, and Donald Trump has denied generally the allegations that have been levied by Stormy Daniels, but she is chronicling a very detailed conversation with him that includes one specific point: The Apprentice, or The Celebrity Apprentice. Why is that part of the conversation relevant? It goes back to the testimony provided by Rona Graff last week to this very jury. Rona Graff, who is the 34-year executive assistant to Donald Trump at the Trump Organization, had the office outside of Donald Trump's office there. And Rona Graff has already testified to this jury that not only did she have a contact for Stormy Daniels, Stormy's phone number, but also that there was office chatter about Stormy Daniels appearing on The Apprentice or Celebrity Apprentice, which hits at and corroborates, you could say, Stormy Daniels' testimony here this morning that she had a conversation with Donald Trump about potentially appearing and what that could look like, having an adult film star appearing on The Apprentice. So this is not just hearsay, but somebody who is very close to Donald Trump corroborating the fact that at least it was a substance conversation. So I know that we are early into this testimony here, but for this jury, they are hearing from a woman who is providing very detailed allegations against a man who is just having a blanket denial to them in return.
We heard that expense payments to lawyers are legal expenses. You pay a lawyer expense payments. We didn't put it down as construction costs, the purchase of sheetrock, the electrical cost. The legal expense that we paid was put down as legal expense. There's nothing else you could say. You don't have to put down anything, I guess. But we put down legal expense was legal expense. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Attorney? And everyone's saying, oh, gee, that's the fraud. That's what they're trying to get us on. The fact that we call a legal expense a legal expense. They marked it down in the books. The check was signed, and the other...
Right now, we have the prosecution asking her some basic questions. By the way, we should note she is going by Stormy Daniels on the stand. The judge asked, or she was asked, I should say, by the prosecution, which name she prefers, if she prefers Stormy Daniels or Stephanie Clifford. She said Stormy Daniels. At this point, they're just really laying some of the groundwork on who she is, her background. She talked about growing up in Louisiana, saying she was born and raised in Baton Rouge. Her parents split up when she was 4. She was raised mostly by a single working mom. Went to a strict elementary school, middle school. So they're really taking the jurors through her life story briefly, taking them up to, you know, she graduated the top 10 in her class, she said, when it came to this high school that she was at, a magnet high school, received a scholarship from Texas A&M. Did take college class, she said, when she was in a high school. And our caller from the courtroom, from our reporter there, Gary Gumbach, says that she's speaking very quickly and is being asked to slow down for the court reporter. She talks about being in the equestrian club, was a member, it appears, of the Baton Rouge Ballet Company. They ask her if she worked in high school. She says, I worked at a stable where my horses board. She shoveled manure. Later, I went on to dancing, she said. And she's always been a dancer, is what she says. Mostly it looks like ballet and jazz. And they're still filling in the rest of the documents. So let me bring our legal analysts here into the conversation. Just help us understand, Catherine, what they're doing in terms of establishing who Stormy Daniels is, why they have to go into this far back in her story.
I always used to tell my witnesses, I want the jury to get to know you. So before we get to this is what happened on this day and I was a victim of a crime or the defendant did this, we're going to give a little bit of the background of your life, because sometimes, like, why do I have to talk about that? So they can know you, so they know you're telling the truth. You know, that where you worked, where you went to school, that you have a family. So this is their way, and Susan Hoffinger is doing the direct examination of having the jury get to know her as a person and finding her credible when she speaks. Now, she's not going to talk about falsifying business records, but she is there to have them see why Donald Trump, no offense to her, she is an adult film actress, why it was important for him to make sure she did not reveal that they had an affair to the public before the election. But first, it's a little bit of background about her.
You mentioned Susan Hoffinger doing the questioning of Stormy Daniels. There's obviously a big team with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Jeremy, do you think that it was real strategic to have a woman questioning Stormy Daniels through this sensitive part of testimony that is to come?
I think in this scenario, yes. And sometimes you see more so on the defense, but often on the prosecution, if there's a sexual crime, though this is not a sexual crime, that sometimes that you would want a female prosecutor or a female defense attorney to address the witness because there's more of a bond and you don't want to look like a guy who's being a bully and who has who has no concept of the issues that a woman would go through, which is understandable. So, you know, Susan Hoffinger, this is not her first time. This is not her first rodeo. She's been on both sides, in fact, as a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. So if anyone is fit for this type of questioning, it would be her. And to your point just seconds ago, you want to humanize that witness. You want the jury to like them and find them to be regular and no different than you. Sometimes that's tears. And even a juror, even a witness who's speaking quickly, that's just a sign of anxiousness. And just like you might have, or Hope Hicks, who was crying because it's a nervous, difficult thing to do to testify in front of strangers.
And we're learning more about Stormy Daniels' story. She talks about moving out of her mother's house. She says she moved out when she was 17. Says, my mother was neglectful and she disappeared for days at a time. She would vanish. I was right at the time of my senior year. I left for a little bit. I considered myself an adult, so I moved out. Daniels goes on to say her mother was not an addict, but would disappear at times. And to this day, I honestly don't know. She said her mother would just vanish. And then the prosecutor asks, have you supported yourself ever since? Daniels, yes. Did you start doing other work, nude modeling? Daniels, we had guest stars at the club and they would do aerial shows. And because I was an actual dancer, you needed credits to be the headliner. She says, I was like, I want to do that, but you have to have some sort of credit, a reason to be the headliner, a reason to come in and be the star. Daniels, you have to have credits, so I started posing to get the accolades. She says, I went on to pose for some magazines to get some accolades to be able to go on tour. Hoffinger, how old were you when you started that work? Stormy Daniels, 21. Hoffinger, did you work in the adult film industry? Daniels, yes. We had contests in North America. The people who make the most were, and then we're still typing here, so that's where we are in this testimony from Stormy Daniels. Danny, how critical is the testimony from Stormy Daniels to this case?
There are two answers to that question. In terms of flashiness, in terms of name recognition, Stormy Daniels is near the top, right up there with Michael Cohen. But in terms of substantive evidence, not that important in my view. Let me say it this way. There have been other witnesses that are far more important to the prosecution's case, arguably even today and yesterday, names that you haven't heard of before, people who are inside the Trump organization who handle the finances. You could argue that yesterday a huge portion of the people's case was made with witnesses that most people have never heard of. And then you have someone like Stormy Daniels, which, you know, I took the position that they arguably didn't even need to call her. I think they do for two main reasons. Number one, to bookend and put a name to the face of the transaction from Cohen to Daniels. And then also, I think she'll testify about the value of her story and how that value, like any other market, increased as the election approached. So she is significant to the prosecution's case, but in terms of what evidence they need from her, it's really minimal. This is more about context. This is more about name recognition. The jury will be riveted in a way that maybe they weren't riveted yesterday with all the accounting testimony. So this is going to be a good witness for the prosecution, even if she is limited in her testimony. I don't think she's going to be very limited. And also, I was wondering if she might sort of go off script and maybe say some outrageous things. It doesn't seem that way right now, but right now she appears to be responding to what the prosecution's asking her. But when the defense gets up, there's a possibility she might throw out a few grenades if they ask questions that are ill-advised. They ask questions of Stormy Daniels, I think, at their own risk, the defense does, because she's not really under the control the way a cooperating witness would be of the prosecution. So she could really say anything, and she arguably has a motive to do so to stay in the public light.
And right now, she's still just talking about her background. They're asking, did you continue to write and direct films? How old were you at the time? She says she was 23 when she was offered a contract in adult film writing. And if she still continues to write and direct films, she says, yes, I still do. She describes the types of movies she's written and directed. She says there's the kinds that aren't scripted. They're just sort of scenes. And then they're basically actual movies that have sex. She says she started directing when she was 23, starts listing some of the names of the different movies that she's directed. Catherine, is it risky at all to put Stormy Daniels on the stand if you're the prosecutor?
No, because, and I agree with Danny, she didn't have to be called. Her lawyer was called. He confirmed that the payment, the banker confirmed the wire. But I always felt as a prosecutor, you don't want to hide a witness. You don't want the jury thinking, why didn't they call her? Unless she was going to be horrific. And if she's willing to testify, I would put her on. And I think the cross-examination is going to be done by Susan Necklace, who, quite frankly, on that defense team is the most experienced in terms of doing cross-examination. So, and again, the woman point. So I don't think she will, what we call, open the door to some outrageous testimony coming out of Ms. Daniels' mouth unless she volunteers that, which would not make her look good.
Jeremy?
Yeah, it completes the narrative to everyone's point. You need her, what I need is a generic term here. You don't need her there to prove your case, but you need her there if you want to complete the narrative and not seem like you're hiding something. The danger is for the defense, if the defense takes the tactic that this is some sort of shakedown and she's an extortionist blackmailer, well, the fear that they're going to do is not just that Stormy will throw a grenade, they're going to drop and detonate their own grenade and open that door, that all of a sudden that limited sexual story that, you know, Judge Merchan has already said we're not going to go into the details. Well, does it open up the door to that? Does it open up the door to any other conversations that occurred? So there's a lot of fear that the prosecution, that the defense might have if they go too far off course.